At the edge of an international border, at the edge of the Pacific, at the edge of innovation, community, education, and discovery, you're listening to At the Edge of It All, a University of San Diego podcast where USD experts speak on topics and stories that impact you and the broader community.
Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Cameron Zeck.
And I'm Lisa Martinez, and on the podcast today, we are joined by Sophia Beck, Assistant Professor of Communications at the College of Arts and Sciences here at the University of San Diego. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you specialize in communications technology, policy. I'm sure part of that is AI, right? And before we get into the meat of things there, I would love to hear what your journey was to get here.
Yeah, thanks for the question because it's been a while. But I'm originally from Seoul, South Korea. So when I grew up in South Korea, and particularly when I was in high school, my dream job was to be a diplomat, in fact. That's one of the reasons why I pursued a major in political science and international relations during my undergraduate studies back in Korea. But then even then, what I was more interested in was to really understand how people from like different communities and countries communicate with each other and exchange ideas, which often leads to like better understanding of different backgrounds, cultural beliefs, and value systems. So it has been kind of natural for me to kind of pivot toward the discipline of communication and as my home discipline over time through my master's program in public diplomacy and eventually PhD in communication. And as I realized how information communication technologies mediate our everyday lives, including those interpersonal and international interactions, I became more keen on studying the regulations of the various systems and technologies, which eventually include issues like data privacy and advancements of AI most recently. But I still carry with myself the core question that I had when I was majoring in international relations, which is like the power dynamics among stakeholders. So in my own investigations and research on the communication technology and its governance, I still look at those power dynamics in detail.
Was there ever like an aha moment as you were trying to actually become a diplomat that you really went into the communication aspects of it? Mm-hmm. What was it specifically about that made you decide to shift?
Yeah, so I was really interested in like soft diplomacy through like cultural exchanges and exchanges of ideas, and that throughout that process, like communication is the key. So that's why I kind of started my journey in public diplomacy as a first stepping stone toward the communication discipline, I would say, during my master's program here in the United States. And then I became really interested in like how our understandings of the politics and political communication really happen, which was my kind of goal at the beginning of my PhD journey. But then over time, I was exposed to different classes that talk about like the implications of algorithms, algorithmic decision making at the University of Southern California, which I did my PhD program at. And that was really my aha moment in terms of, like these policy issues are really the sub-discipline that I would want to focus on because it has like real life impacts on people's and their ways of communicating with each other.
And before Cameron gets into the usage of data and what you research, what are you doing specifically here at USD? How did you come to USD and what are you teaching in terms of classes and the students?
Thanks for asking because I'm super like into like teaching and making these legal issues more accessible to students. So I came to USD and joined USD 3 years ago. Before joining USD, I was a postdoctoral fellow at the UC Berkeley Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity. Where I have continued my research on like data privacy regulations, and at USD I was hired as like as a person to hone in on to the legal issues of media and media policy and law. And I'm teaching classes like media law and policy and international media, like introduction to media studies, of course. But I have developed this new class on media law and policy, which did not exist before I joined the USD. So I'm really thankful to my department, in fact, for granting me such agency and autonomy to really draft and develop the class for the first time and make it be part of the regular curriculum. And I'm introducing a new topics class next spring about artificial intelligence and media ethics.
We definitely have to take that class.
I'd invite you.
We're going to sit in.
That would be lovely.
That is very interesting because it's what everyone is trying to grapple with right now, right? I think the introduction of artificial intelligence has been so fast.
It is.
And has overtaken almost every aspect of our lives. I think that really understanding the implications of it is so important, especially for communications.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how is I'm the kind of person that always signs up, like submits my emails to get 20% off at every store I go to.
Yeah, we've been all there. Yeah.
But how is our personal data being used first? And then I'm also curious because you mentioned AI. How is AI then using our personal data?
Yeah. So, I mean, thanks for bringing that up because that's like our everyday like moments of sharing our data to third parties and institutional actors, right? But there are two types of data I would like to distinguish first. So on the one hand, there is the kind of data that we voluntarily share with those institutional actors, including corporate and
like when it tells you, like, do you accept all these cookies and things like that? Is that part of
that
it?
can be counted as voluntary sharing of our data because there are different like implications that are ethically problematic, but on the outset, yes, it's kind of the data that we voluntarily share, like those our full names, our email address, our phone number, birthdays that we share during our sign-up processes. Or, for example, in the case of like AI chatbots like ChatGPT, the kind of like personal information we might end up sharing during our prompts in conversations with those AI tools, that will be considered like the kind of information, our personal data that we voluntarily share. But then on the other hand, there are a so-called behavioral data, which refers to the digital traces that are observed and captured by these systems.
Like the using of social media,
yeah,
right? Like your habits.
Yeah, our usage patterns of social media, and coming back to the case of like ChatGPT, the tone or like writing style of our prompts, which might be used for inferring about our characteristics like gender or age, even when we never explicitly share the specifics with the very tools. So those two kinds of data are kind of the key data that are used by different like platforms and social media, even before the era of AI, and nowadays particularly by the AI systems. And one of the ways this personal data get used oftentimes by the AI tools in specific are in terms of like training and operating the very models. And we have documented lots of like harms coming out of those usage. For example, one of the key concerns has been those training data being biased, right? Because a lot of these tools are trained mostly on past data, which tend to reflect existing historical and structural biases in society. So these tools trained on the very past data are likely to replicate or reinforce those biased harms.
I was going to say, can you give an example of that?
One of the well-known, well-talked about examples, I would say, is like how the facial recognition technologies have not been accurate, especially when it comes to identifying faces of African American communities compared to more pale, whiter skin-toned individuals. And that's considered to be because of those past data that was used for training the models are largely based on white populations and not having more inclusive, diverse training data sets. So that's kind of a typical example that we can think of.
So I guess my question to you is, from a person who knows nothing about this, is how can people really have control over anything nowadays? I mean, I have teenage kids that are constantly trying to download free games, you know, and I always tell them nothing is free. Something's always happening.
Yes.
But like it's everything we do. So what control, if any, do we have? And do people in other countries have similar problems with the lack of control? Are some other countries, do they have more control than the U.S.? Does the U.S.? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess what I'm trying to ask. It's
Yes,
frustrating.
Yes, I totally understand. And maybe before moving on to what we as individuals can do, I'd like to start with like why there are such problems of lack of control. Because my like go-to mantra, in fact, is to make this a systemic issue and looking for systemic solution instead of putting more and more responsibility on individuals. Not to disregard the importance of literacy and education to be more informed individuals, but to really make sure that the harms are not perpetuated by making this an individual issue, right? So the harms are often perpetuated because of many different layers, and I would first like to point out the lack of transparency and user friendliness. For example, I mean, you kind of alluded to earlier, but the privacy policies and terms of use, we just click agree without reading a single word for different sign up of different social media apps or different platforms. I mean, it's not an individual problem because they are made in a way that is impractical for users, everyday users, to read from top to bottom because it's really lengthy. If you decide and you're really determined to read every single thing, you will probably spend most of your day reading all those terms of service for every media app or platform you're interacting with, right? And they're full of legal jargons. It is written in a one-sided manner because they do not ask users to provide input of any
And if you don't sign, you can't use it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just like you either want to use it or not, right?
Yes.
A lot of times.
And people often say, well, then you don't have to use it. Nobody is forcing you to use it. But then if we really understand and look at the ways the current digital economy works, not signing up for things like LinkedIn, for example, is not really an option for like recent graduates who are looking for jobs to have profiles and presence on those highly prominent platform. So you cannot really say to recent graduates that not using LinkedIn is an option.
Right.
If you really think about the social fabrics and different like lines of marginalization too. So the terms of service, privacy policies are often really not user friendly, and they're buried in these like different steps you have to take even if you want to like locate it again after the sign up process. So that is one thing. And the other thing is mostly because of the current legal framework in the United States and in other countries, we are still mostly taking like opt-out by default approach. So lots of default settings are set in a way that may not always respect the user's actual preference. So coming back to the case of ChatGPT, for example, I'm not sure whether you have ever tried this, but the default setting of ChatGPT is that our content or the prompts that we have shared or ordered ChatGPT is to be used for training their models. So unless you go to the settings, click on the data controls feature and toggle off the use of data for everyone for training, your conversations and data are actually being funneled into the training system for AI chatbots like ChatGPT. So the default settings are not just technical choice, but it's actually a very structural choice that has like implications downstream. But oftentimes the legal approach is usually like opt out by default, not opt in or beyond notice and choice consent.
And it may be hard to even find a way to opt out, right?
Yes,
You're
because
getting
again,
to that area.
you're not either aware of it or it's not explicitly notified to you. And even the notification, we constantly receive tons of notifications in our inbox. So unless there are like more explicit measures in place, it's often hard for everyday individual to really look for it and make what's best for them.
And you touched on it a little bit, but what can we as individuals do now
Yeah.
to protect our data?
Yeah, so I mean, there are different measures that have become in place, especially in California, which is the first state which introduced a statewide data privacy law when the U.S. still does not have any comprehensive federal level data privacy legislation.
It does not.
The U.S. does not have a comprehensive data privacy law for corporate data practices.
Why is that?
There are so many different reasons. Obviously, there are like different thoughts, I guess, or worldviews about what matters more to us than others, and there are like kind of political divides between the two major parties, and there are like different clauses like private right of action or preemption of state laws that have been like kind of roadblocks to passing a comprehensive federal law. I mean, I can touch on that if you're
Right.
interested in hearing more, but that has been kind of the status quo in the United States, that the U.S. does not have a federal protection. So instead of federal protection, there have been some so-called patchwork of different state laws, and now about 20 states have introduced different kinds of and levels of protections that apply to their state residents. And California has been the first state to introduce and considered kind of having the strongest one. Though it has its own limitations. So under CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, which went into effect in 2020 and also was amended like 2 years ago in 2023, it provides like different protections. So for example, as a California resident, we can go to our favorite retailer website and ask for how your data is collected and with whom those data is collected, or delete some parts of your data that you have provided to them. So there is like a form you can fill out as a California resident, and if you have noticed in your interactions with different websites, there is like a specific section almost always for California residents. And now more like states introducing their own state privacy laws, there are more than California in those sections. But that is kind of a measure we as individuals now have to take some actions and steps if we want to kind of have an understanding of what's going on with our data, even though it's not like a
right.
full picture.
Now, Professor, what can people do with that though? Because like the average person, well, sure, you can have access to that information, but would we even know what it says and how to interpret it and how to, sift through it and see what it means for us?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for pointing that out, because it's kind of mixed. It has produced mixed results. Like on the one hand, it's better than nothing, because like having this law in place would at least make companies more aware of the possible legal and ethical issues of their data practices and try to be more considerate, hopefully. That's the kind of expected impacts and consequences of having this kind of law, better than nothing. But on the other hand, like to what extent these laws are really being meaningful is like another question. And I actually do this practice or like a little workout session with my students at times to ask them to kind of go over those websites and try to fill out the form. And if that process itself is user friendly, and many students find it quite frustrating because it's not clear cut and it takes a while for the company to get back to them. And also the kinds of data that are provided are not always clearly organized nor like truly meaningful. For example, I told you earlier that you can even request like with whom this data are being shared with under the CCPA, California's privacy law. But then in the current California's privacy law, the information that is given to you as a user is only the categories of third party, not the actual name of the third party. So you will only know, my information has been shared with, let's say, advertisers of some sort, but not exactly like which advertisers, all the list of third parties.
And it's shared because those third parties pay a good amount of money for that information, right?
Oh, yeah, that too. And third parties. So another problem with this current data ecosystem is that there are so many like myriads of actors acting as third parties in the processing and sharing and flow of our personal data. But we as individuals it's almost impossible to have a full picture of all those entities involved. Yeah.
And then real quick before we wrap up, touching back on my question, are there
Yeah.
one or two top things you would suggest for people to
Sorry,
do?
I keep taking us off track.
No, this is the
to end with for our
yeah.
listeners,
Yeah.
one or two top things to do to protect your data.
Yeah, so the first thing that I would say is, I mean, it's like a cliche, but being informed, being more educated is the most important first step we as individuals can do.
Listening to this podcast,
Yes.
watching the podcast.
Exactly. I mean, I really agree with that because at least having a little more sense of what's going on in terms of data privacy issues and why it matters to me and my community and even the people that I'm not directly related to, but as a mankind, we are all related to each other. So listening to this podcast, taking a class related to privacy or AI ethics, or just paying attention to newspapers, that is kind of a first step we can take. And that's one of the reasons why I actually also was part of launching a new interdisciplinary minor on technologies and society that will start this fall, which is kind of a collaborative effort from across the university, including the College of Arts and Science, Engineering School, and Business School.
So you don't only have to be part of the College of Arts and Sciences to be able to take this class, obviously.
Yeah,
right?
you can be undergrad of any
discipline
major,
is
any
helpful.
discipline at USD, and you can sign up for this minor starting this fall. I'll be the program director, so if anybody is interested, you can always reach out to me. But that kind of initiative was formed mostly because of this very question and trying to make our new next generation of students to be more informed of and given opportunities to more critically think about
Right.
these issues related to emerging technologies, which include data privacy issues and AI ethics for sure. But the other thing that I would like to kind of encourage all of us to start doing is to embrace some moments of friction, because this is not individual fault. I would like to make it clear, but at the same time, we often just bypass opportunities for friction under the name of convenience. And I would like to bring up a case of international airports where you are often given a choice to just be subject to facial recognition, identification, or opting out. And of course, it's also a matter of making it not clear enough for individuals to opt out. And most of the people just opt in. So it feels like a natural flow for you to just go with the crowd. But you have a choice to opt out of that facial recognition detection during the TSA and the checkpoint for your identification, right? So I realized, I mean, I do it myself. I opt out almost always whenever I can. And after I opt out, I noticed more people, realize they
that.
can do that and do the same thing when there was nobody in front of me who were opting out of it. So I would call it moments of friction that might be not as convenient as just going with the
Right.
flow. But I guess those are important moments for us as individuals to realize, we can be a collective of people who can kind of make more informed decisions about how our data gets used. And I really hate the rhetoric of nothing to hide, nothing to worry about. It's not
Right.
about whether you have things to hide. Even when you don't have any bombs in your house, you don't want anybody else to be watching you when you're enjoying your own time at your home, right? Home should be your sanctuary. It's kind of the same thing for your personal information, even though you might not have anything to hide necessarily because you're not a bad person, but it doesn't mean that your privacy can be violated.
That's very interesting because, as you said, we usually just go with the flow of the day, the flow of what's going on, but it's
Yeah.
okay to ask more questions
Yes.
and be more active
Right.
in what you share about your life.
Right, right.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. I certainly learned a lot, and we are definitely going to stop by your class.
Yes, I would love to have you in my class.
I hope those who are listening and watching at home also found this helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Again, these are tidbits of information to kind of get the conversation started. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you for joining us. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to catch the next one.